How do you put time on people's lives that are stuck in traffic? They dread the 401, driving down the 401. They dread the Gardiner. People avoid going downtown because of the traffic right now.
Taking traffic underground. Premier Doug Ford announces his government wants to build a tunnel underneath Highway 401. Good afternoon. The province is launching a feasibility study to gather information on what it would take to build a new expressway underneath the busiest stretch of highway in Canada.
The Premier made the announcement this morning, saying the tunnel would be one of the largest in the world. CTV News Queen's Park Bureau Chief Siobhan Morris is live to bring us the details. Siobhan.
Well, we've heard from opposition leaders this morning and urban planners who say Doug Ford's proposal here is a fantasy. They worry about the cost, the headaches in getting this thing built. But the Premier says this is about having a vision for the future of transportation. It's the country's busiest highway, the wide expanse of the 401. But in a growing province, congestion is mounting. The Premier says it's time to be bold and tunnel under the 401 to move people faster.
This tunnel would serve as a new expressway for both cars in transit, from Brampton and Mississauga in the west to Markham and Scarborough in the east.
Ministry of Transportation staff have already started to study how long a project of this gargantuan scale could take to complete, and critically, how many billions it will cost. While the government hasn't shared projected costs for other signature projects like Highway 413, Doug Ford insists he'll share the dollars and cents.
And why wouldn't I be up front? And we're doing a feasibility study. So a feasibility study will come in and we'll be transparent. But I'll tell you one thing, we're getting this tunnel built.
A tunnel under the 401 would dwarf Boston's infamous Big Dig.
25 years after the idea was hatched, the dig will finally end. But construction was a nightmare.
Something the Premier says he experienced firsthand visiting Beantown during construction.
They had old wires and pipes that they didn't realize they were hitting frost underneath. That's not going to happen here. We're experts at tunneling.
Even though a 401 tunnel would be much longer, spanning multiple cities and adding transit, the Premier is determined, even if it's a tunnel built bit by bit.
If they're telling me 30 kilometers is X, 40 kilometers is Y, and 70 or 60 kilometers is another cost, let's take a look at it.
We have heard messages of support from trade unions and professional organizations that could, in theory, be part of an eventual tunneling project. The Toronto Region Board of Trade says this also marks a pivotal moment in addressing the deepening congestion crisis. Reporting live, I'm Siobhan Morris. Raheem, back to you.
Thank you, Siobhan. Looking at the future of housing in the GTA, a new report is outlining what is hindering construction of new homes.
The study finds fees, taxes, and slow approvals are major threats to new housing development. CTV's Sean Leathong is live to bring us those details. Sean.
Well, Michelle and Raheem, the report is done by the Building Industry and Land Development Association, and what they say is that the number of new starts for new homes are actually going down, so the potential for the housing crisis to get worse is very much real. What they actually point to are those fees that are put together by municipalities, saying that they have increased exponentially since the year 2000 and more so since 2013. They point to the fact that new housing builds are requiring fees that go under the idea of infrastructure, what is needed to have police forces, and anything that just supports any new builds in the area. A little while ago, I talked to Justin Sherwood from Build, and here's what he had to say about the actual number value that we'll see on the user end.
Government fees, taxes, and charges from all levels of government add approximately 25% to the cost of a new home. And that's the municipal fees, plus land transfer tax, plus the provincial and federal portion of the HST. And to give you some context on that, Sean, we're talking $355,000 added to the cost of a single family home and approximately $245,000 to the cost of a condominium.
Now, Mayor Olivia Chow was asked about this morning, and she said those fees are needed for infrastructure, but this group Build is calling on all levels of government to relieve some of these fees, particularly taxes that are being paid because the price of housing has gone up so much in the last 10 years that they're getting paid an exorbitant amount. Reporting live, I'm Sean Leathong. Raheem, send it back to you.
Thank you, Sean. Still ahead, Uncle Sam is calling on U.S. citizens in Canada to make sure they vote in the next American election. Details on outreach efforts coming up a little later in the newscast.
More news in a moment, but first, let's take a look at the skyline. And it is cloudy as we reach the midweek mark, and there is still the chance of some showers, but there are brighter days ahead this week. Jessica Smith is here with a look at the current conditions. What do we need to know, Jess?
You'll still need the rain gear later on this afternoon, but overall, we're kind of reaching the tail end of that system that brought all that rain throughout the day yesterday, overnight, and into the early morning hours this morning. It is relatively mild out there. We have a southerly wind that will pick up as we head into the afternoon, gusting at times upwards of 40 kilometers an hour, adding to all of that warmth that we have out there. The good news is, as we step in towards the rest of the week, the sun returns. We're sitting right now at about 22. It already feels like 30 here in the city, and we're going to warm up as we head throughout the day. We're a little closer to seasonal the further east you go, but overall, this heat really not going anywhere as we step in towards the next couple of days. So just keep that in mind as we approach the end of September. Coming up, I'll have a full look at your long-range forecast. We'll break down when all this rain moves out, when the sunshine returns. But I'll send it right back now to Michelle and Rahim.
Thank you, Jess. Next to a protest that was held outside TDSB headquarters in North York last night, where demonstrators called for the firing of teachers involved in a field trip that saw students actively take part in a rally.
The issue also has the attention of the Premier and Education Minister Jill Dunlop, who has announced an investigation by her ministry. CTV's Mike Walker has the story.
Dozens of parents and community members rallying on the doorstep of the Toronto District School Board, raising concerns over a field trip last week that was supposed to be about Indigenous issues. Instead, saw students participating in a protest.
I want to make sure that our schools keep politics out of the classroom.
Students from schools across the city attended a community rally in support of the Grassy Narrows First Nation, a demonstration calling on the government to address decades of pollution in their community. But parents argue they were misled, alleging students were marching and exposed to pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel chants.
Don't get involved in geopolitics. You have no business, you have no right, you have no standing, you don't have the education to know what you're talking about. Stick to courses that kids can learn that will make them better Canadians.
Our children should not be that innocent. I find that this is child abuse, and a lot of kids are uncomfortable with that.
The TDSB has issued an apology vowing to review its field trip procedures and has launched its own investigation. Now Ontario's education minister is ordering an investigation into the field trip. Jill Dunlop issuing a statement that reads in part, "It is clear that the TDSB has failed to take swift and decisive action on this matter. As such, I've asked my ministry to initiate an investigation into the events that took place at the TDSB last week," adding that those responsible should be held accountable.
We can't have our kids going to any protest. It doesn't matter what type of protest it is. They should be in school learning math and arithmetic, spelling and geography, history. That's what we need to do.
The investigation welcomed by concerned parents and municipal leaders.
And I hope that she suspends everybody at the top while they're holding the investigation and then hold them accountable once they figure out what it is that exactly happened.
This will continue unless there are consequences, and it's clear in the Education Act, under the Criminal Code, and TDSB policy that this is strictly forbidden.
For its part, the school board says it welcomes the Minister of Education's support and will cooperate fully with the investigation, adding that if the investigation concludes that TDSB policies, procedures, or professional standards were not followed, we will take action, including disciplinary action, to ensure accountability. Mike Walker, CTV News.
And the Toronto District School Board will hold a special meeting tonight to discuss the fallout of the field trip.
A woman was seriously injured after she was struck by a vehicle in Mississauga. This happened around 5 o'clock this morning in the area of Burnhamthorpe and Cawthra. Peel paramedics say the woman was rushed to hospital in critical condition. Police say the driver involved remained at the scene.
A man is in hospital following a stabbing in Ajax. It happened around 6 p.m. in the area of Taunton and Westney Roads. Police say the victim was taken to a Toronto area hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Police have not provided any info on possible suspects, but they say they believe the incident is isolated.
A fatal crash is under investigation in Caledon. OPP responded just before 6 p.m. last night. This happened on Highway 9 east of Orangeville between Gore Road and Centerville Creek Road. One person was pronounced dead at the scene. The cause of the crash is still being determined.
The woman who alleges that Jacob Hoggard sexually assaulted her in June 2016 is set to continue her testimony in court today. Crown prosecutors told jurors they should expect to hear the complainant describe a non-consensual encounter that included choking, slapping, and name-calling. Hoggard has pleaded not guilty to a charge of sexual assault. The Crown and defense agree on some of the circumstances of the case, including that Hoggard was in Kirkland Lake and that there was a sexual encounter in his hotel room.
The Conservative non-confidence motion aimed at bringing down the Trudeau Liberal government will go to a vote in about 3 hours today on Parliament Hill.
New Democrats and the Bloc Québécois are expected to vote against it when the vote is called just after 3:15. But there's a new twist. The Bloc is threatening to bring down the Liberals on October 29th if they do not pass key legislation that they have on the table. CTV's chief political correspondent, Vashi Capello, set the stage.
Well, if I remember right, a few weeks ago, we were talking about how unpredictable this parliament would be since the NDP ripped up its formal agreement to keep the Liberals in power. And today is a true proof point on that. So we thought this confidence vote was happening. And quite simply, if there are enough votes against the government would fall. We thought it was happening, but it would be undramatic because we know where the NDP and Bloc fall. They're going to vote with the government. So that's set to happen this afternoon. There will be another confidence vote after that on the capital gains tax changes that the Liberal government brought in, but that is also expected to go the government's way. Here's where things got interesting today. The Bloc Québécois, the leader of that party, stepped up to the microphone and he laid it out for the government. He has two bills that he wants the government to unequivocally endorse. One on supply management, which of course is a huge issue in Quebec. The other on expanding and boosting old age security.
What we are proposing is good for retired persons in Quebec, but also in Canada. It's good for milk and eggs and poultry product producer in Quebec, but also in Canada. So that's good for everybody. However, we will not ever support any motion or vote that would go against who we are. And who we are is well known. We will not vote in favor of something going against French language in Quebec or even in Canada.
He says if the government doesn't do that, by the end of October, he is prepared, as long as it's in the interest of Quebecers, to force an election over another confidence vote that happens then. So once again, things become completely unpredictable, though the government stands likely after today's votes. The same might not be true a month from now. Back to you.
Vashi Capellos reporting for us in Ottawa. Hundreds of people gathered outside the Israeli consulate last night in support of Lebanon.
Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine!
Demonstrators chanted pro-Palestinian slogans while also calling for an end to the escalating violence between Israel and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. More than 500 people have been killed in Lebanon as the two sides exchange airstrikes. Demonstrators are calling for an immediate ceasefire in the conflict, as well as in the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza.
Well, unfortunately, what's happening in the last 3 days is not something new. It's a result of almost 1 year escalation with the continuation of the war in Gaza and what we consider a genocide against Gazan people.
What we're looking at is essentially, them trying to recreate what's happening in Gaza in Lebanon, right? So we're seeing the scale of the destruction increase, and there's been every attempt to try to slow down this and try to force the Western allies of Israel to enforce an arms embargo, to pour more pressure on the Israeli government to end this genocide and end what it's doing. And yet what we're seeing is our political leaders are actually giving them the green light.
Similar demonstrations are also being held in major cities across Canada and the United States.
And another major escalation in the conflict overseas today. Hezbollah firing dozens of projectiles into Israel with one missile aimed at Tel Aviv. The United Nations Security Council is expected to discuss the conflict today. Air raid sirens sounded in Tel Aviv as Hezbollah launched its deepest strike on Israel yet. The Israeli military says it intercepted that missile. Hezbollah says it targeted the headquarters of Israel's Mossad intelligence agency. Another rocket was fired into northern Israel, including one that struck an assisted living facility in the town of Sept. No injuries have been reported.
Again today, Israeli warplanes have been carrying out extensive strikes in southern Lebanon. Israel has expanded the areas it has been targeting with attacks on the town of Jija, just south of Beirut. Since the Israeli offensive began Monday, 569 people have been killed, according to Lebanon's health minister. And CTV's Scott Hurst is standing by live with the latest. He has been following this closely for days now. Scott, we're also learning about 2 Canadians who were killed in Lebanon. What can you tell us?
Michelle, a tragic update from Global Affairs Canada confirming that 2 Canadian citizens are amongst those killed in southern Lebanon over the past few days as the bombardment between Israel and Hezbollah has increased significantly through the past week. And CTV News has confirmed through family members. They are Hussein and Dad Tabaja. CTV News spoke with their son Kamal, who says his parents were trying to get away from their home in the south and were stuck for hours in heavy traffic. Here's a photo provided to CTV News of the couple who were killed, Hussein and Dad Tabaja. Their son goes on to say when they were stuck in traffic, that is when they were hit by an airstrike, saying Israeli Defense Forces had given people in that region warning to leave as strikes were imminent, but Kamal says it was not enough time. His parents were Canadian citizens who lived in the nation's capital in the Ottawa area in the 1990s, where they raised their 6 children. We also heard from a Canadian citizen who has been able to get out of Lebanon because of the increased insecurity in the region. Here's what she had to say.
Things escalated pretty quickly. Last week's attacks were unprecedented. They were very surprising and very unexpected, and that basically shook the country to its core for 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row. And then suddenly now we're we're in a full war a few days later.
In the meantime, the UN Refugee Agency says it is scaling up its operations to support the growing number of displaced people in Lebanon, saying just in the past 5 days, more than 90,000 people have been displaced because of the ongoing strikes between Israel and Hezbollah.
And as this threat to life persists, what is the latest response from the Canadian government?
Michelle, the Canadian government says it's growing increasingly concerned about the escalation in violence between Israel and Hezbollah. There are roughly 20,000 Canadian citizens registered with Global Affairs Canada in Lebanon. Of course, that is just the number of Canadians who are registered with the government. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says she is in constant contact with her counterparts in the region, and the Department of National Defense says there are roughly 50 members of the armed forces in the region helping Global Affairs with contingency planning should the security situation deteriorate significantly in the region. But at this time, there are no public plans for a Canadian airlift, a Canadian evacuation. So in the meantime, Canadians are being told to get out while you can, get out while commercial operations are still available. Michelle.
CTV's Scott Hurst live for us in the CTV National Newsroom. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
The war in Ukraine is a major focus at this week's UN General Assembly meeting in New York. And this morning, President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed his fellow world leaders.
It's the Ukrainian people who feel the full pain of this war. It's Ukrainian children who are learning to distinguish the sounds of different types of artillery and drones because of Russia's war. It's our people who are forcefully separated by occupation because Putin decided he could do whatever he wants. It's our heroic soldiers who are giving their lives to defend our country from invaders trying to steal our land. That's why we say, rightfully so, there can be no just peace without Ukraine.
Zelensky urged the leaders to stand with his country and not seek an out. He said there is no alternative to the peace formula he presented 2 years ago. It includes the expulsion of all Russian forces from Ukraine and accountability for war crimes.
A U.S. Senate committee has concluded Secret Service failures prior to the July assassination attempt of Donald Trump were foreseeable and preventable. The bipartisan investigation says there were a number of failures on almost every level. They included planning, security, and allocation of resources. Investigators found there was no clear chain of command among the Secret Service and other security agencies, and officials were operating on multiple separate radio channels, leading to missed communications. It's still many weeks away, but the U.S. Consulate General in Toronto is already preparing to help make sure eligible voters can cast their vote in the next American election.
It's part of an absentee voting outreach information session being held today. CTV Scott Lightfoot is live at the U.S. Consulate and has more. Scott.
Well, they're all wrapped up here, but officials at the consulate were on the sidewalk here on University all morning. They were hoping to connect with anyone who might be coming in for consular services, but also just stopping people as they walk by, asking if they were U.S. citizens, explaining just how easy it is for them to cast a ballot from abroad. We spoke with one voter this morning, a U.S. citizen now living in Canada, and asked her why she thought it was important to vote, even though she wasn't in the country.
Having the right to vote is a privilege, and not voting when you are able to is disrespecting everyone in the United States who's disenfranchised, and people around the world who are not able to vote for their government. Even though the United States has a lot of problems, the fact that it's a government by the people, for the people, is very valuable and very important.
So any U.S. citizen of voting age who lives outside the country has the right to vote, regardless if they're registered to vote or have never voted before or been outside the U.S. for a long period of time. So today, officials walked people through the steps needed to cast a ballot. Officials here said the mail-in ballot system is secure and safe, despite claims south of the border that it is not. It's estimated there are 600,000 eligible U.S. voters living in Canada currently. One of the biggest issues for those voters are knowing the actual timelines for their vote to count. Timelines which consulate officials say vary greatly.
The tricky part is every state and locality has a different timeline. So we help people, and this is one of the reasons we're out here, we help people navigate that, make sure that they can get their ballot in time. And if they can't get their ballot in time, we're only 40 days outside of the election right now, they can still file a write-in ballot, and as long as it's postmarked here at the consulate by Election Day, it'll still be counted.
So again, 600,000, more than 500,000 Americans currently in Canada who can vote in the U.S. In the last U.S. presidential election, only about 3% of them actually cast a ballot. Reporting live on University, I'm Scott Lightfoot. Michelle and Raheem, back to you.
Thank you, Scott. Tropical storm Helene has now strengthened into a hurricane, and forecasters are warning it is expected to intensify even further as it crosses the Gulf of Mexico on a path to Florida. Helene has already prompted residents to evacuate schools, to close, and officials to declare emergencies in Florida and Georgia. It was located about 810 kilometers southwest of Tampa. The storm is expected to become a major hurricane, with its center making landfall in the Big Bend area of Florida as soon as late Thursday. Several counties on the state's west and northwestern coasts have issued evacuation orders.
Canada continues to grow. New population data has been released. StatsCan estimates there were more than 41.2 million people living in Canada on July 1st. That means more than 250,000 were added in the second quarter of the year. It represents a growth of 0.6%. The increase in the population was almost entirely due to international migration. Jess.
Speaking of that hurricane, there are a lot of snowbirds here in Canada, maybe thinking of heading south of the border. So we'll break down the kind of storm track that we're expecting as this system makes landfall. As we head throughout the next couple of days, likely it stays far south of Ontario and the East Coast. But if you're traveling to the U.S., keep that in mind and always check your flights, because it could be a little tricky over the next couple of days. Coming up, I'll have a look at our forecast here at home and what we can expect when it comes to the much lighter rain that we are seeing throughout the day today and what we can expect throughout the rest of the week.
Well, we've reached the midweek mark, and September is flying by. We're talking about October. It's next week, my goodness. And okay, so we have another gray sky, but there are some nice days this week, I promise.
Well, and even the fact that the temperature is still quite warm, right? It's not like you're really reaching for that sweater. No. It's been great weather.
It's giving soup, you know, when you look outside, I'm like, okay, I want to have soup. I want to put on a cozy sweater, but it's so warm. Mm-hmm. Like, it still feels like 30 degrees. Wow. I brought the jacket with me, didn't need it as I made my way out the door today, and it stays pretty nice over the next couple of days. So as we start to see the sunshine return to our forecast, we really hold on to a decent amount of warmth as we say so long to the month of September. Weather is brought to you by the Presler Law Firm. Injury lawyers you don't pay unless they win. Now, it's been kind of a cloudy start to the day, a bit of a shelf there. We saw that system roll through yesterday. We get a bit of a break to start the day, and then another round of active weather rolls in as we head throughout the late afternoon, early evening. So don't put the umbrellas away just yet, but a cool shot from the chopper just to show you where the clouds start and where they end. And this story doesn't have an end to it. We're looking at this active weather continuing as we head throughout the day today. Again, we're at 22. It feels like 30. It is really mild out there. Into the afternoon, we don't see too much of a fluctuation with our temperatures, at least for the GTA. And we're holding on a little closer to seasonal the further east you go, but it's still really muggy out there, and a gusty southerly wind keeping us above that seasonal mark with the base temperature and the humidex values. Into this evening, we're sitting at 17. We should be at 9, so we're not feeling fall-like at all. The same through Bancroft. They should be at 5. They'll be at 16. Still pretty stormy in eastern Ontario as the tail end of the system kind of pushes its way out. It is pretty wide sweeping, and it is still prompting some alerts through portions of northern Ontario. Bracebridge, you're included in that. For the GTA, we'll see if any alerts pop up for us, but we are still keeping a close eye on the system as we make our way throughout the afternoon. Again, after it pushes through, behind it, some high pressure will make its way in, and we have a beautiful kind of almost second half to the week. We're looking at sunshine returning just in time for our Thursday and some of our Friday. Through our afternoon today, again, we get some sunny breaks. The bulk of the really heavy rain for the downtown core of the GTA is gone. We're going to see some lingering showers through eastern Ontario as we get through the overnight. And then as we get into the morning commute for many tomorrow, it is dry and it is relatively sunny. Heading into our Thursday afternoon, again, if you wanted to get out for lunch, you wanted to go for a walk for the kiddos, they won't need that rain gear back into t-shirts and shorts. It stays really, really warm outside, and those humidex values not going anywhere. As we head in towards Friday, we see a little more cloud cover start to return as we head in towards the end of our day, but we are staying relatively dry. It's just a little cloudy out there, so we don't get that brilliant sunshine to end the week. Temperature-wise, we're still nowhere near seasonal as we head throughout our Thursday and Friday. The showers today, again, likely into the second half of our day, pretty scattered in nature, and then as we head through the overnight and into the day tomorrow, that all pushes out. We're looking at a just above seasonal daytime high, pretty close to where we should be for that low as we head into our Thursday evening and then through our Friday. It's not so bad. Again, sunshine to start the day, cloud cover rolls in, and then we're looking at a mostly cloudy weekend, but relatively dry. So something to look forward to if you do have plans outside. Looking ahead to next week, Monday, the last day of September, at least it comes with sunshine. And then as we step into the month of October, we do trend a little closer to seasonal. So if you're missing the more, I guess, traditional fall weather, the colder temperatures, we don't quite get cold as we head in towards the beginning of October, but we are trending closer to where we should be. So if you like the cooler weather, Raheem, it's going to be nice for you. If you don't, sorry, I got nothing for you. I'll send it back over to you.
Thanks, Jess. Well, the Blue Jays continued their series with the Boston Red Sox last night.
Just to make a throw. Guerrero drills one to deep left center field. It's going to be off the wall. Loperfido will score. Lucas is in behind him. A 2-run double for Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
The Jays jumped out to a lead in the third inning. However, the Red Sox were able to force extra innings and went on to win the game 6-5. The teams will wrap up their series tonight. First pitch is just after 7.
In game 4, Evans with a chance to clinch it off the draw, score! Alex Steves fires it home.
The Leafs hit the ice in Ottawa last night in their second preseason matchup. The Leafs opened the scoring. However, the Senators ended up winning the game 2-1. The Leafs will be back on the ice at Scotiabank Arena on Thursday to play the Montreal Canadiens.
The Juno Awards are adding 2 new categories next year.
The award for TikTok Juno Fan Choice goes to
The South Asian Music Recording of the Year Award will celebrate homegrown musicians who work in genres inspired by the region, including Punjabi and Bollywood music. Non-performing Songwriter of the Year will honor writers who pen lyrics for other musicians. The 54th Juno Awards ceremony will be held at Vancouver's Rogers Arena on March 30th.
Canadian artist The Weeknd has set a new Spotify streaming record. The pop star from Scarborough now has 18 songs that have been streamed over 1 billion times on the platform, breaking a tie with Drake. After Hours, the title track from his 4th album, is the latest song to reach the milestone. His song Blinding Lights is the most listened to song on Spotify with nearly 4.5 billion streams.
Coming up, one teen's experience with arthritis is shining a light on the disease and giving hope to others. We have his story after this short break.
From From high school athlete to using a walker and back again. That's been the medical journey of Zach Spinoza.
And as our health reporter Pauline Chan tells us, his message is one of hope for anyone of any age dealing with arthritis.
As a kid, Zach Spinoza's aches and pains were downplayed as growing pains. But at age 15, he was diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis, a form of rheumatoid arthritis.
I went from relatively athletic kid to all of a sudden not being able to move because of pain and swelling and gaining a significant amount of weight from the medications used to deter that swelling and pain.
Eventually, he did well on medications for several years, but in 2021, he was hospitalized for weeks with macrophage activation syndrome, a condition that affects some 10% of people with rheumatoid arthritis.
I ended up getting a 30% chance to live, and my dad was getting ready, like prepped, and figured out if he could be part of his liver.
Fortunately, that wasn't needed, but it was a slow road back to recovery for Zach. He keeps this photo to show how far he's come, now the owner of a fitness center.
It's a pretty horrifying and debilitating disease, which I think a lot of people get the impression when they hear arthritis, like don't crack your knuckles, and it's my grandma or my grandpa has that disease, right?
It affects people of all ages, including children. Arthritis is a really complicated disease. There are over 100 types. Some of them really, really serious, requiring immediate diagnosis and treatment in order to reduce the progression of the disease.
But there is no cure, although recent drugs have been developed to manage the autoimmune forms like Zach's. For him, exercise is part of his routine to slow the progression of his arthritis, so are infrared saunas. But these therapies aren't usually covered, so he'd like to see more done to support preventative measures.
Reactionary healthcare will never be as good as proactive healthcare.
Pauline Chan, CTV News.
It's an idea that could dramatically improve the quality of life for cancer and trauma patients. Synthetic bone that dissolves as real bone grows.
CTV's Krista Sharp has more on this new research at the University of Waterloo.
This liquid, which looks kind of like pancake mix, could one day become bone in a human body.
I used to work at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto, and I worked with orthopedic surgeons there, and I became exposed to this problem of large defects that don't heal by themselves.
A simple broken bone can mend itself, but for bone cancer or trauma patients who are in need of an entire new bone or bone graft, it's more complicated, which is why a team of biomedical engineers at the University of Waterloo are developing a substance that could be 3D printed.
So we're working with a biopolymer nanocomposite. So it's basically polymers from sources such as soybean oil and then hydroxyapatite, which is the mineral that's actually in your bones currently.
Once placed in a person, the idea is that the 3D printed bone would eventually dissolve as the body grows natural bone to replace it.
One advantage is that our material doesn't contain any cellular material, so we're not going to have a rejection like you would have with an organ.
It's taken half a decade in the lab just to develop the version of the material they have now, which in some cases may need to be strong enough to withstand the weight of the human body.
It's going to likely help improve quality of life and also reduce healthcare costs. Like if you think in the long run how much it costs.
Because no rejection means fewer surgeries.
As you might have noticed with the skull, it's smaller than a full human adult skull. So ideally we'd like to scale up our process and then just as this technology is fairly new, so as it's building, we're getting more and more capabilities with what we can do with it.
It will likely take at least a decade and millions of dollars before this is ready for hospitals. But for now, the team is working towards clinical trials. Krista Sharp, CTV News, Waterloo.
Still to come, North American oil slipped in morning trading today. Details and the rest of your business headlines after the break.
Get Toronto's top stories, breaking news alerts, and watch live. Download the CTV News app.
Oil prices slipped in morning trading as traders continue to worry about China's weak economy.
Andrew Bell of BNN Bloomberg brings us the latest in business.
Hello there. Here are your business headlines. North American oil slipped below $71 US today amid fears that China's proposed stimulus for its economy won't actually translate into higher energy demand. Rabobank analysts warn that, quote, the market remains at risk of a supply glut if OPEC Plus proceeds with plans to return some of its sideline production. Oil is down about 4% so far in September. The natural gas industry is confident that power-hungry data centers for artificial intelligence will be the biggest addition to U.S. natural gas demand in coming years. The CEO of EQT Corporation, the biggest U.S. gas producer, says AI-related electricity demand is expected to translate to between 6 billion and 13 billion cubic feet a day of gas in the short term. Total U.S. consumption right now is just over 100 billion cubic feet a day. And finally, Tesla shares have jumped almost 20% this month. Analysts point to signs that sales are starting to pick up in China. Barclays analyst Dan Levy says, quote, this China strength comes at a very opportune time, helping to offset ongoing weakness in the U.S. and Europe. That's the latest in business. I'm Andrew Bell of BNN Bloomberg.
Whether looking for something new or in need of some retail therapy, Canadian consumers appear to be turning more and more to thrift stores.
And as CTV's Dylan Dyson reports, secondhand is no longer second choice.
Oh, wow.
Thrift shopper Kelly Brooks says she would never be caught dead in a shopping mall.
It's more interesting. I'll find, things I couldn't find anywhere else.
At Johnny's Vintage in Arnprior, she's looking for something unique.
I never know what I'm looking for. It will jump out at me.
New data released from Value Village says that thrift shopping is growing into a mainstream retail choice, with 90% of Canadians shopping, donating, or both.
Over the last 6 years, I think our economy shifted, so we've seen people convert their retail mindset entirely different.
Well, there's a lot of pluses with thrifting. Helps the environment, helps your pocketbook. It's fun too. And it also gives you, lets you kind of be unique.
One popular thing this season is vintage knits in any form, color. This one's got llamas on it.
Many thrift and consignment stores now stocking brand name items.
We have a lot of Michael Kors bags. We have some Gucci bags, some Gucci sandals. The purses are really popular right now. We've got a Lululemon section, which is also popular with a little bit of everybody, but mostly the younger girls like to come in to look for the Lululemon things.
Gen Z consumers are thrift shopping's biggest advocates, which has pushed major brands like Zara to introduce secondhand shopping in U.S. stores.
Even the big retailers that historically have sold new merchandise realize that thrifting is a major trend, and they want in on the action too.
It's one of the biggest things I noticed is that high schoolers aren't even checking the malls first, they're checking the thrift stores first.
Dylan Dyson, CTV News, Arnprior.
An update on an investigation into a giant pyramid scheme that involves a Canadian-based money service business. It is alleged to have stolen more than $2 billion from overseas investors. The Canadian listed as the company's director has now come forward. CTV's Adrian Gobriel has more.
The Canadian director in question is Randy Matthew Lane. A joint investigation by the Investigative Journalism Foundation and CTV National News found Mr. Lane in the Vancouver area. He came forward after seeing our previous stories with a tale of his own.
It's extremely stressful to think that my name's being used to create companies and defraud people, apparently billions of dollars.
Lane says he learned of not just one company, but 6 businesses allegedly peddling fraudulent investment schemes using his identity.
The BC Securities Commission contacted me.
Lane claims he'd never heard of any of the businesses using his name before, including Metaverse Foreign Exchange. Also known as MTFE, the company pitched itself as a reputable Canadian trading platform for cryptocurrency investors in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, where police have said as many as 500,000 people became MTFE clients, including Arif, who asked we only use his first name.
People believed it that it's a Canadian company, it has strong laws, it won't scam us, and so we should invest.
On the back of MTFE's Canadian credibility, Arif convinced his parents to invest, sinking 3 years of savings into the trading platform, until one day the company's app went offline and vanished. The turn of events pushed Arif to the brink.
You even had suicidal thoughts.
At that time, that was what I thought, that if I just go away, all my problems should be gone.
There seems to be a backdoor system within Canada to be able to fraudulently create companies.
In 2021, Lane began work to incorporate a Canadian company with a group of Chinese business partners for a medical device they'd created. The person who completed the paperwork here in Canada, Stephen Zhang, operates an accounting company out of this Markham, Ontario shared office space. It's the exact same unit that MTFE used as its registered business address. A manager at the office was unable to provide any details, so we visited multiple locations in the Toronto area that Zhang had listed in separate incorporation documents.
Do you know who Stephen Zhang is?
No idea.
We found shocked residents who'd never heard of Zhang or his companies.
This definitely has all the hallmarks of an Asian organized crime network. They're very good at using Canadians in this country for their nefarious purposes.
Lane says he's speaking out because he wants to clear his name. He also wants the fraudulent businesses using his identity shut down. Adrian Gobriel, CTV News, Toronto.
Coca-Cola's newest soft drink is being removed from shelves 6 months after making its debut. Coca-Cola Spiced will no longer be made. This is a bit of a surprise because it was marketed as permanent, but the drink never really seemed to catch on with consumers. The company says there will be a new flavor introduced next year.
Canada's competition watchdog has slapped Cineplex with a record penalty.
The costly fine is for a deceptive marketing practice it calls drip pricing, when consumers aren't immediately made aware of hidden fees. CTV's Alison Bamford explains.
Like everything, it's buyer beware.
A warning for consumers for something they can't always spot.
Sometimes you do have to reach that final checkout page, unfortunately, to find out that there are hidden fees.
Hidden fees, additional charges that aren't advertised on purchases until the customer goes to pay. It's a practice known as drip pricing, and it's illegal in Canada.
It might seem like hidden fees are a couple extra dollars here or there, but they really do add up, especially for people who are on tight budgets.
In the case of Cineplex, so-called hidden fees resulted in the company collecting nearly $39 million over the course of a year and a half. But now the movie giant's paying for it. The competition tribunal fined Cineplex that same amount after ruling the company did not properly notify customers of a $1.50 online booking fee applied during checkout, making a pricey pastime that much pricier.
I haven't been to a movie for a while because of the movie prices. Last time we did go, we paid like $80 for a concession.
Consumers won't be compensated, but the fine serves as a deterrent for others. In the past, the Competition Bureau has cracked down on car rentals, satellite radio subscriptions, and tickets for sporting events to protect companies that play fairly.
You could be at a competitive disadvantage because your headline price is higher than your competitor who is using drip pricing.
Cineplex plans to appeal the decision and says it will continue offering online booking with its $1.50 fee, saying both its website and app are upfront about the charge, and the company is confident its practices meet the law. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
Coming up, a surprise encounter for a resident in BC has gone viral. We'll have the scary interaction when we return. A Coquitlam, BC resident has gone viral because of a surprise encounter when he walked into his garage. Take a look at this. Yes, this is what Alex Gold came home to last Wednesday as he walked into his open garage. He shared the video on Instagram that shows the bear walk towards him as he claps his hands multiple times. He backs away towards his SUV, which is parked in the driveway there. Gold says he managed to get inside the vehicle and honk the horn to scare away the animal and what appeared to be a nearby cub. According to safety tips from BC Parks, Gold actually did the right thing here by staying calm. He says he has met bears before, but he's never been this close. Oh, is that the baby there?
This is how you know they live in Coquitlam and not Ontario, though. Because if I saw a bear come in my garage, I would not have that reaction of to be so aware and say, let me make some noise and go in the car. Like, That was impressive.
He didn't scream out loud. Like, wouldn't you have just screamed at the top of your lungs?
Scream. I've encountered a lot of raccoons.
Yes.
But nobody,
and I scream.
So, I mean, good on him for staying calm, because I would not. A beautiful day today, so hopefully you're not encountering any wildlife. That is scary. But it is going to be nice temperature-wise, but we're still dealing with the chance of some rain this afternoon, so keep that umbrella handy and give yourself time for the commute. Some storm alerts in place through portions of northern Ontario. That includes areas through Bracebridge and onto that border of Quebec, as we see a line of showers pushing through up there. For us here, we're holding on to more in the way of just some cloud cover, and then the showers kind of roll through off and on, very sparse in nature throughout the afternoon. It is still warm out there, still feeling like 30 as we head into that second half of our day. But the good news is, after today, we kind of round out the month of September relatively dry and close-ish to seasonal before we step into October on Tuesday of next week.
Thanks, Jess. And that is CTV News at noon. Remember, you can get Toronto's breaking news all day long on CP24 and at our website, ctvnewstoronto.ca.
For Jessica Smith and all of us here at CTV News, have a pleasant afternoon. I'm Michelle Dubé.
And I'm Raheem Ladani. Be sure to join us later for CTV News at 5 and 6.